Hi guys, good to see you all here after the dinner last night, early this morning. So just to give you a bit of background, I, excuse me, come to this as an early career researcher as well. So I did a PhD in physics in New Zealand and then a postdoc at Boston University. And based on my experiences of the way we publish and review and these sorts of things, decided to try to do something about it, and that is Publons. I guess one of the key things I've learned during my PhD, during my postdoc, but also during the last couple of years of learning about academic publishing in detail, is that peer review really is at the heart of all of these things. It is the best way we have for evaluating other research. It's the best way we have for ensuring that we publish high-quality research as well. But what's really interesting is there's not really too much of an incentive to do any peer review as a reviewer or as a researcher. And so the way we look at these problems is they're two sides of the same coin. And we think that by addressing them head-on and turning peer review into something you get recognition for, we can solve a lot of these things. So how do we do that at Publons? Basically, we collect peer reviews and turn them into a verifiable, measurable research output. So we either collect reviews directly from reviewers, or we work directly with Publons to curate reviews and index them and add them to our platform. And then with that, we can do a number of different things. We can build profiles for reviewers. We can use information from those reviews to do a number of interesting things, including building tools for editors. So helping editors to find reviewers, to recognize reviewers, even to screen reviewers for any indications of fraud, that sort of thing. The sorts of profiles we can build, this is an example of Stephen Roberts. He's an editor for Nature, but is also a reviewer for a number of different reviewers, for a number of different journals. What I think is interesting about most reviewers in the world is they review for lots of different journals and a lot of different publishers. And we tend to make the mistake as publishers of thinking that, it's my reviewer, but reviewers really are kind of spread across all publishers. The interesting thing about these profiles, just by putting them online and making it available for people to claim and to get credit for, you start immediately to see some interesting effects. So, first of all, you see tweets like these from Stephen Roberts. It actually gets a lot more fun and a lot more interesting to a reviewer to do a review when you know you're going to get some sort of credit for it. And we've actually started to see a lot of evidence that people will take their official verified Publons reviewer profile, download it, and use it as evidence in their evaluation for promotions and when going for tenure and that sort of thing. It's obviously, of course, very early days, but you do start to see these things appearing. In terms of the level of interest in a system like this, as of a few weeks ago, we had about 45,000 different reviewers on the platform. We've added well over 180,000 reviews, spread across thousands of different journals. So quite a range of different fields and publishers as well. And the cool thing is we're building quite a bit of momentum around this platform. So every week we add now well over 4,000 organic reviews. So these are reviewers coming to Publons and adding reviews to the platform to get credit for it. A big part of our push this year has been to then integrate with journals. We work with a number of different publishing partners to integrate directly into the system so reviewers actually don't have to do any work themselves to get recognition for review. And during the review process, they can just opt into getting credit. So we now have well over 100 different integrated journals automatically facilitating this process. Most recently, MDPI, who we announced yesterday, just in time for COASP. So that's pretty cool. It's actually really cool to see the open access publishers get behind something like this. It's great. But that's enough about Publons. I think credit for peer review is becoming, we've been doing it for a while, but it's becoming quite topical now. A lot of people are starting to talk about it, both because it's obviously a good idea, but it seems to be something that is gaining a bit of traction in the market. So I wanted to talk about the general problem of credit for peer review and some of the immediate questions that come up as soon as you start talking about this. So the first one is, what is peer review actually for? And it seems to me that we all have different ideas of why we do peer review and what it's for. Then why should we give people credit for doing peer review? That also seems to be a question that comes up a lot. Finally, why should we start doing this now? I mean, we've been publishing papers for hundreds of years. Why all of a sudden is it important to be giving people credit for peer review? And then finally, I guess it's important to me to point out that this isn't just about credit for peer review. Credit for peer review is just the start, and I think Stephen in his talk alluded to this. Expert researcher evaluation is really at the heart of what we do as researchers, and there's a lot we can build on a system where we can get credit for peer review. So I've talked to a lot of people, and you get a lot of answers for what peer review is actually for. For authors, it's a way to help them to improve their paper before publication. For editors, it's a way to ensure the validity of a paper that you might not be necessarily an expert in. For journals, it's a way to filter manuscripts so that you can ensure that your prestigious journal only gets the most prestigious research. And then for the research community, it's also a way to provide context and insight into new research. So for example, at the REF, peer review really tells us about what is the top research out there and what is the impact that's expected to have. But the interesting thing is that in all of these discussions, there's actually historically been like minimal consideration for the reviewer in all of this. And I think it's important that we think like, where does the reviewer come into all of these things? So the question then is, why credit for peer review? If you look at what it is to be a researcher, your entire career is built on top of credit. Authors get a lot of credit for publishing research. Editors get a lot of credit for managing the publication process. As an editor, being on an editorial board is actually really good for your career. But as a reviewer, through all of this, all you really get is more review requests. It kind of seems to me that there's a little bit of a missing piece there. So why should we give credit for review? Well, for reviewers, it's a great way to be recognized as an expert in your field. And it's actually something that a lot of people feel like they just deserve. You know, I put a lot of time into this. I deserve some credit for it. The nice thing about starting to provide forms of credit is that it provides an incentive for reviewers to want to do their review. As I pointed out before, you see tweets all the time where people say, now that I'm getting credit for review, I'm actually doing a lot of a better job of it, and I'm doing more of it. So for authors, it's actually can be quite good because it tends to lead to a better review experience. If reviewers know they're getting credit, they'll put a little bit more effort into helping an author out. But what's most interesting to me is probably that the people that stand to benefit them to the greatest degree out of all this is journals and editors. I think if you can find a way to incentivize reviewers to do more review, you can speed up the review process. Reviewers will be more likely to want to review when you send out your review request. So maybe instead of sending out 10 review requests to get 2 reviews in the end, you can decrease that number. It's actually also a great way, if you can show who your reviewers are, it's a great start to proving that you have a high-quality peer review system, which is what journals are all about. And then I think, obviously, a lot of these things can be done on a journal-by-journal basis, but a big part of our thesis is that by combining this credit into one platform that works across all of the publishers in the world, it allows us as journals, as researchers, to get a better understanding of reviewers. Where are people reviewing? How much are they reviewing? These sorts of things. And also gives us a way to start to look to protect against the different kinds of peer review fraud that we've seen crop up. But most of all, it's just kind of obviously a good thing, it seems to me. The other interesting thing is, why now? Why in the history of all of peer review, is now the time that we should be giving credit for peer review. I was really interested in seeing Eileen's talk the other day, seeing the mention or the stat that peer review only really kicked off in the 70s and became a more and more important thing from then on out. I think a lot of that has to do with the volume of papers that we're publishing and the amount of review that we need to do now. But it does mean that we went from a situation where 50 years ago, most of the people involved in the peer review process, editors and editorial boards, were getting a lot of credit, to a situation where most of the time that's spent in peer review, you don't get any credit. So it does seem to me to be something that's been building over the last 40 or 50 years. But more specifically, why now? Why in 2015 rather than 1995 or whatever? And there's really two problems. For blind and unpublished peer reviews, it's actually really hard to measure that. And it's really easy to fake the fact that you did some reviews. It's critical to be able to solve those two problems before you can start giving credit for peer review. I should also point out that, I guess, we do optimize what we measure for. So one of our theses behind this is that if we can find ways to start to measure this, it will become more important. There will be more of an incentive to review, and almost just by the fact that we can measure it, we will improve the process of peer review. So peer reviews are hard to measure. I think one of the key learnings we've taken out of this is that there's more than 20,000 different journals around the world, and they all, to a certain extent, have a different peer review policy. And if you want to build any sort of standard for recognizing review, you have to be able to support all of those different policies. This has come up a lot lately, so I thought I'd just quickly outline our default policy for review. So first of all, one of the reasons for blind review, notwithstanding the fact that you could potentially switch to a situation where you publish everything on preprint servers, is that authors do worry a lot about being scooped in their research. So it tends to be quite important to maintain privacy for authors until the paper is published. So one of the things we do on Publons is we make sure that even if a reviewer is getting credit from the point that they do their review onwards, we never publish information about the review or about the manuscript that could reveal anything to harm an author until after the manuscript is published, so until the manuscript is public. But once the manuscript's been published, we allow the reviewer to decide if they want to sign their name to a review. It seems to us that the reason that reviewers are often hiding behind the veil of blindness is to allow them to speak their mind. So if a reviewer wants to sign their name to a review, it seems like obviously a good thing to do, to allow them to do. After publication, the reviewer also decides if they want to publish the review. However, we make it pretty clear that an author, an editor, or a journal can request that a published review is hidden at any time, all the key stakeholders. The other thing we do is we specify blanket policies that journals can implement to override reviewer policies. So, for example, the American Chemical Society prohibits reviewers from signing any reviews on Publons, and it prohibits reviewers from publishing any reviews on Publons. And that's just a blanket policy that we've implemented across all of our journals. We've done a lot of looking at what is the right policy, and this is something that we're always trying to optimize and improve. One of the things we've done is we've surveyed literally thousands of different researchers, and we get some interesting stats. We asked reviewers, if you're not going to publish a review, why would you not publish it? Turns out that more than 50%, the main reason or the only reason you wouldn't ever publish a review is that you're concerned that the authors or the editors might not like it. On the flip side, if you ask reviewers or researchers, whether they would mind if their reviews of their articles are published, about more than 70% actually say, I'd totally be fine with that, or I'd be fine with that assuming it was a reasonable review. So it seems to me there's this interesting dichotomy where most people, when asked, don't mind if reviews of their articles are published, but they're very afraid of publishing reviews of other people's articles, of other people's research, purely because they think other people won't like it. But it is an interesting thing for us, and one thing we're looking at is automatically making it impossible to publish a review unless the author specifically opts into doing it. The other thing about the technology problem here is it's pretty easy to put on your CV that you did 3 reviews for Nature in 2013. No one's going to be any the wiser. So we see it as an important thing to do to ensure that we verify the reviews coming into our system happen. And verifying means confirming with both the reviewer and the publisher or the editor that the review actually happened. So we have a couple of different verification strategies. We'll look at the review receipt that comes out of the editorial management system if the reviewer sends that to us, and we'll use that as one level of verification. If we're unsure about that, or the reviewer doesn't have that receipt, we'll actually directly query the editor. And then finally, as I said, with over 100 journals now, we actually just directly integrate into the editorial management system to check all of these things. And what we do is when you download official review reports to get official credit for this stuff, we only allow you to show your verified reviews and that sort of thing. So making it possible to measure and making sure that what we're actually measuring is relatively accurate. The final thing about this is maybe more of a question that I'd like to raise, is that can we go beyond just credit? I think it seems to me that credit is just the start, and by providing incentive for people to want to review, we can start to look at, post-publication review or any of these sorts of things. But we can also build a lot of more cool things on top of that. I don't think I should have to point out to this crowd that openness is actually inherently a good thing. The more openness we can provide to research, the better. It seems to me that's kind of one of the underlying ideas behind open access. Two examples, just putting review out there is actually, we found, a really good way for early career researchers to learn how to review. Right now, there's not really much training provided to reviewers. So just by putting reviews online and making it possible for people to read them, it actually probably does improve the review process and the understanding that people have for how it all works. Then, of course, with this sort of data and this network of reviewers, expert reviewers and the things that they've reviewed, it does make it possible to provide tools for editors to help them to find and screen potential reviewers, and also to monitor reviewer workload across journals. If you, as an editor, are asking a reviewer to do 2 reviews per month, that seems potentially reasonable, but if 10 different editors are asking reviewers to do that same thing as well, that's a huge workload for a number of reviewers. And we actually do see that. And in aggregate, a lot of reviewers are doing well over 20 reviews every 6 months. It's quite amazing how heavy the review workload can be. And then finally, I think Stephen alluded to this when he talked about the REF and how peer review is actually the way we use the primary or the best way we have of determining the quality of research outputs. Reviews do give us a lot of insight into those sorts of things. A particularly interesting point I'd make is that as journals and as editors, by facilitating a review process for every paper that's published, there's actually a lot more coverage and a lot more understanding of the research than any alt-metric or kind of usage metric ever will have. So I think, for example, in the metric tide report, I took a look at the data there. For more than 90% of all of the research outputs in the 2014 REF, there was no Twitter mention, no Mendeley download. No Science Direct download. And the stats are very similar for Mendeley bookmarking and everything. So it's actually not a surprise at all that these indirect usage metrics wouldn't actually give us that good of a correlation to quality of research. But peer review is different. It spans all of the world's research. So I think that's really interesting and something to think about. So for us, credit is a critical part of what we're doing, but it's just the start. And that's Publons.